Namaste. Welcome to part two of discussion heat thinking. So far in part one, we have just processed how the thinking process is different in humans than other beings. Also, what are the different elemental forms and faculties involved in the heat system of thinking. Sir, somewhere in the discussion, we were talking about the psychological process of split, how the heat model explains the flow and involvement of the elementals in that.
Let me list out the entire split phenomena, then put it into parts, take up one part for heat application, and similarly, you can apply it to all other parts of the process. So the split
Right.
process goes like this. We are told in the Kleinian scheme of things that the child wants the good breast, the child fantasizes it but cannot be satisfied. So then the child thinks the bad breast is present, withholding all the goodness it wants in the form of milk, emotions, pleasure, security, and everything else. And then the child attacks the bad breast in its fantasy with all its aggression, sadism, and imagination. More the aggression, more the sadism, more the imagination, more brutal are the attacks. After exhausting one's capability of attacking, the breast still does not come. So then the child concludes that the bad breast is more powerful than he is. And now the bad breast is going to attack it. Worse than the way he attacked the bad breast. And that is where the anxiety of the attack of the bad breast starts. And after that, the loss also becomes real. So the sadness, the loss, the guilt of maybe I have done something to deserve it, the shame of having lost it, the rejection, and all those difficult feelings come up. And somehow it has to be resolved. So part of it is repressed, part of it remains as it is, part of it is expressed, part of it is sublimated, part of it gets into a personality disorder, something goes on. So this is the whole process. Now we can divide this into
Oh,
parts. Step 1, the child is hungry and wants the good breast. Step 2, the good breast is not available. Step 3, the child fantasizes but is not satisfied. Step 4, child concludes there is a bad breast present because he cannot understand the concept of absence. Step 5, he attacks. Step 6, he realizes all his attacks are futile and now are futile. Step 7, now he believes the bad breast, more powerful than him, is going to attack him with ferocity more than the ferocity of his attack. Then anxiety mounts. Then helplessness and powerlessness comes. Then loss becomes real and sadness, abandonment, I am not good enough, inferiority, guilt, shame, rejection, all of these feelings arise. Now, if you look at the whole sequence, if you look at all the 7, 8 parts, you can even divide into 10 parts, but you look at all the parts, the part which is most important is that the child concludes that the breast is going to attack it with even more ferocity than his ferocity. Now, here, let us say the child would have believed. So, there are three children, child 1, child 2, and child 3. Child 1 believes, as we classically believe, that the bad breast is going to attack with more ferocity than his ferocity of attack. Child 2 believes that regardless of what he did, the bad breast is not going to attack with such ferocity. The attacks will be very mild or there will be no attack at all. Or let me say the attacks are very mild. Third child will say, I have a right to do whatever I feel like. Why should there be a consequence of my attack? Why should the the bad breast attack? I can get away with everything and I cannot be attacked. And the bad breast is not a bad breast. It also has goodness enough not to attack back. So what is different in all the three? Child 1, child 2, child 3.
can ever child think like this that the good breast can come and save?
The good breast can.
What if just come and save from the bad breast?
Yeah, maybe that is the third child
When
thinking
the
of that
good
kind.
breast is not around.
Right. So, in short, he will say, I will not be subject to attack under any case. Now, the difference between child 1, child 2, and child 3 essentially is of positivity and negativity. And at this juncture, if you look at the whole process, this is step 7 in, let us say, a 8 or 10 step process. And this is where the key lies. If you believe the attack is not going to come, right, the subsequent problems will not happen. If you believe attack is going to be mild, still the subsequent problems will not happen. But if you believe that the attacks are going to come, then all this persecution, anxiety, and the rest of it follows. So if we focus only on this step 7 and apply the heat model, what does it look like? So we see here the Agnya Chakra is thinking it out, and Agnya Chakra is using all the epistemological elementals, it's using imagination, it is using characteristic elementals of positivity, negativity, and it's thinking it out. Psychologically, we are looking at use of sadism or compassion, and here the core is evaluation. How difficult are going to be the attacks of the bad breast? You can have anything from 0 to 10. And if the characteristic elementals are very positive, and you conclude there's not going to be any attack, rest of the things is perfectly okay. So it's happening in the Agnya Chakra, but since most people have high negativity, they the root chakra gets loaded, and the root chakra getting loaded with affinity, then life energy goes into the root chakra, and then the fear elemental is activated. So how much will be activated based upon the assessment and evaluation of the Agnya Chakra? Okay, how painful and brutal the attacks are going to be. So this is how we look at it, that when you go in details, we pick up one step and we apply heat to that step, and we get into epistemological analysis, and we go into affect generation. And in both the cases, we in the sorry in
So,
the
for example, later in the life, if there are people who have more of anticipatory fear and anxiety, are somewhere stuck in this part of the process. All
right.
right.
So if the negativity is more, let's say there are two parts, right? One is one's own aggression, and second is negativity. Let us say somebody is so compassionate that he does not attack the bad breast. Now, if he does not attack the bad breast, the question of return attack is very low. So, first is how much is your aggression, your sadism, your imagination, and the second is what is your assessment? How brutal the attack will be. Will it be lesser than yours, equal to yours, or more than yours? And there, the Agnya Chakra uses the characteristic elementals to give flavor to the entire direction of thinking. And based upon the assessment, the
And
persecutory anxiety will be generated in the root chakra. The positivity also may be that I will be saved by the mother, even if the breast attacks me. That also can be a thought in some child. So, so this is how we look at the heat application to this thing. That we look at the split, we divide the split into parts, take up the most critical part, apply heat analysis to it in both epistemological terms, cognitive terms, and affective terms, and then find out where is the core. And the core usually comes out to be at the level of positivity or negativity and sensitivity. These are the core at the core of generation of affect.
in case of bipolar, is it both positivity and negativity and sensitivity, all three together at play?
Sensitivity and negative will be at play in all the pathologies.
In all the
in all the
pathologies.
pathologies, especially if you look at all the hydraulic pathologies, where we believe
Mm.
that the bottled up emotion is at the root of the difficulty. In the non-hydraulic part, the elements like envy, like containment, the ability to internalize, they come into play. But since we deal with 80% of the
Got
times, we are dealing with the hydraulic part of the system, we get into this part where the the core is affect generation, and in affect generation, the core is the assessment by the Agnya Chakra ki how much affect should be generated. And this is where CBT goes wrong. Not goes wrong, but is incomplete. That the thoughts which are there at the conscious level or pre-conscious level are very different from the thoughts which are used to decide how much affect to generate.
So in CBT, as you mentioned, um, we talk of thought leading to effect. So how does heat thinking go on this?
In heat, we look at tri-directional flow. Thought leads to affect, affect leads to thought, behavior leads to thought, thought leads to behavior. It's a three-directional flow. Thought can lead to affect or behavior can have impact on thought and affect can have impact on the other two. So it's a three-directional thing, number one. Number two, we don't believe the thoughts are free like CBT believes. We believe thoughts are under the thinking is
Right.
under influence of karma, of transpersonal
Effect.
elements, of unconscious, personal as well as collective,
Mm.
as well as things put on by others or by culture or uh, by higher beings or higher forces. So thinking is not free like CBT wants us to believe. And the uh, thinking also has a very strong effect of the unconscious on the way it proceeds. And thinking is also not free from effects like envy and narcissistic rage. They can actually break the chain of thinking. So on these parameters, the take on cognition or thinking of heat is very different from CBT. For example, let me give an example if you want. Uh,
Yes, please.
let us say we talk about obsessive thoughts. And in psychoanalysis, we believe many of the cases are rooted in non-resolution of Oedipus. So till the affect in the Oedipus is not released and the idea not made conscious, it will keep generating obsessive thoughts. So here affect is generating thoughts. And when the affect is released, thoughts are no longer generated. Similarly, often behavior can lead to development or cessation of thoughts. For example, you are angry and you do shadow boxing, and after that the anger is released. So here what we are looking at is behavior releasing affect, and that in turn changing the way you have thoughts. You will no longer have those obsessive thoughts driven by anger.
That is
So
like mostly with school of ISTDP
yeah,
or behaviorism.
so ISTDP actually is rooted in affect leads to thought leads to behavior. Affect leads to thought, affect leads to behavior, affect leads to thought and behavior, affect leads to behavior and thought. But the root is affect in ISTDP. Uh, Whereas in heat, we look at a triangular flow that the root can be affect, the root can be thought, the root can be behavior, and all the three are interconnected to each other. So in CBT and ISTDP, in CBT the root is always thought, in ISTDP the root is affect. In heat, any of the three can be the root and can have tri-directional flows.
Hmm. Sir, am I audible to you?
Yeah, I can hear you, but I can't see you.
Hello.
I can hear you, but I can't see you.
I think there's some problem when I cannot see you.
Oh, uh,
Likewise, I can hear you, but I cannot see.
acha. Please go on. Or should we pause for a moment for the network?
Yes, sir. So does heat go into thoughts that come not necessarily from inside as well?
Yes, because it's a very holistic and open system, and it's partly also a mystical system. It's a modular system. You can remove the mystical part and keep only the rational part, but in its whole
Mm.
form, it's a mystical system. It's a spiritual system also. So it is open to thinking being influenced by forces which are suprahuman, beings which are suprahuman, by being recipient to something which is dawning upon everybody, and those who are ready to receive can receive. That's how many people have the same thoughts at the same time or near about the same time. It is open to being inspired by other beings and given ideas by other beings, and one being a good channel. It is open to non-local thoughts coming through pranic chords or coming by projective identification. It's almost like, for example, take the quantum phenomena of entanglement, how the knowledge flows across millions of kilometers without any medium between the two. So we don't know mystically what, it's a mystery how that flow happens, how entanglement actually works. But we see in psychology also similar kind of things in transference, in projective identifications, in pranic chords, in synchronicity, in strange kind of intuitions. So we are open to all of it, and what seems esoteric is not actually poetic, it's experiential. And it is the poetry of experience, it's
Mm.
not pure poetry. So what we have kept in this model is not something which is imaginary, because some people have experienced it and experienced it very vividly. We have incorporated that into that model, to this model.
So how does the structure of the unconscious affect thinking here?
Um, it affects, again, as we said, thought is not free, and it's affected by the unconscious. Now the way the unconscious affects is this: first is its involvement, that very few thoughts can go, as we saw in the movement in the model, very few thoughts can go straight from the chakra to the environment. Most will move either through the personal unconscious, collective unconscious, or both, and therefore the unconscious gets involved. And the moment unconscious gets involved, the material of the unconscious and the processes of the unconscious are going to have an effect on thinking. That is how it is so difficult for us to extricate our thinking from the surreal, because the surreal is always at work in that unconscious. And that is how imagination and something dramatic always gets added to our thinking. The a slight magical component comes out by and large in most thinking. The game of omnipotence is by and large active in a large amount of thinking process. So first is involvement. Second is contribution, that it can create thinking. Unconscious can create thoughts by virtue of the desires or fears there. The entire fantasy or even the logical thinking can be driven by it. So first is influencing by involvement, second is contributing by creating, third is blocking. That if there are very difficult things in the unconscious like intense envy or rage, you can actually have an attack on the link of thinking, and you can actually block thinking. What you see in cognitive thought disturbances or catatonia, or some forms of mental retardation, which we wrongly analyze as mental retardation, when in fact it's a cognitive thought disturbance, or certain forms of regression to primary narcissism. So this is third. The fourth is distortion. It can distort our thoughts in completely new directions because of the way the split or the Oedipus joins in the thinking process. Then we have to look at how all of this happens. And there we look at the journey of the thought in the mind. And there we look at beyond how the thinking process actually needs an incubator to happen. And unless you have a basic container inside which can provide that incubator for something which is almost ready to become a thought but is not able to take the final shape. It's like all the ingredients of bhaji pav are there, but somehow the last step is not happening because it requires somebody to mix it up. And that is where the container comes in. That we have what Beyond says, we have thoughts awaiting the thinker. That there are thoughts which are waiting in the unconscious mind for attention or our ego to pull it up so that it can come up as thoughts. Or there are half formed thoughts which are awaiting a thinker as a container so that they can become full formed thoughts. So there we look
The
at the
classic
journey.
example for what you're saying would be the classical example of what you're saying is to all the discoveries and inventions where
Right.
things do exist and it is waiting for it to unfold and take up the shape of a logical thought.
Or take the form of a baby, that the baby feels cold in the winter, does not know what's happening, and it throws around its hands and legs and starts weeping. And when the mother tells the baby, let's say the baby is capable of understanding, even though language may not be there, the baby may not be able to speak but can hear. And when the mother tells it, are you feeling cold? The baby says yes, and suddenly a lot of anxiety goes away. It's like the infinite anxiety of unknown is now finite anxiety of something. What Beyond says, the name closes the infinity. The
Mm.
moment you give a name that you're feeling cold, the baby says yes, and suddenly half of the anxiety goes. The name closes the infinity. So this
So
also
the
is a very
unknown becomes known.
yeah. From infinite you come down to a very finite thing, and that becomes far more manageable. The moment you give the understanding, the name closes the infinity. So uh, that is the journey of thought which also happens inside of it. So we not only look at what happens in the unconscious, how it influences the thought, but also the whole journey of formation of thought from its epistemological constituents. How, for example, if I want to decide, is this thing good, beautiful, or not beautiful, right? I will have to make epistemological use of epistemological variables like quality, quantity, symmetry, beauty, and then arrive at a judgment. So all of this, the constituents of thought becoming a thought, and the thought once having formed being influenced by the various levels of the unconscious mind as well as esoteric sources, all of that goes as we look at the formation of thought and the journey of thought hence after becoming a thought, because it's open to influence once it becomes thought. So stage 1, constituents becoming a thought. Stage 2, the thought moving across the unconscious mind layers with influences from the unconscious, and which can be of involving nature, contributing nature, blocking nature, disturbing, distorting nature, and then finally it comes in the conscious. So this is how it is. Now if you look at want to have mastery at very elemental level, pre-thought constituent level, what we call in Hindu psychology bhuta shuddhi, purification at the very elemental level, that is practically impossible to achieve at 100% level, but to a great extent we can achieve. And somebody really needs a extraordinary mastery to work at the constituent elemental level. One can work at the aggregate composite level, but to work at the core elemental
Right.
level is very difficult.
So how does heat go into the connection of language with thought?
Here heat is slightly old fashioned, unlike Wittgenstein and many others, Chomsky and Wittgenstein and Lacan. we are slightly old fashioned. So we don't believe the limits of language are the limits of thought. Number one. Number two, we don't believe the mind is structured like the language. There may be similarities in the structure of both, but that may be driven by something more fundamental than both of them. But to say that language is first and that in turn drives the structure of the mind, that is not something that we believe in. Third, uh, we don't believe language to be ontologically fundamental. We believe language to be a tool. So we are more towards Wittgenstein's second work, uh, philosophical
Mhm.
investigations, than his first work of Tractatus. That we believe more in the uh, language as a tool theory rather than language as a fundamental ontological entity. And we also believe thinking is not actually dependent on language. Of course, it's dependent on language for all of us as adults, but uh, let me put it this way, thinking can happen without language. Now, how? We can look at it in so many organisms that they are constantly recognizing something in the environment, evaluating it, responding to it, changing, evolving. And we also look at our own immune system. Without language, it has intelligence. There's some sort of thinking involved to separate the friend and the foe. So it is at the level of physics, chemistry, biology, far more fundamental than human sounds, which are constituting human language. So thinking is happening, action is happening, change is happening, evolution is happening, everything is happening at the cellular level. Far more fundamental and much before language makes an advent. So our worship of language is far more constricted and limited than the linguistic philosophy or the analytical philosophers uh, practice.
So, as I mentioned prior also about bipolar, can we apply it to a pathology, say bipolar?
Sure. Uh, Let us say bipolar can happen in variety of ways. Let us say one causality of bipolar is object gain and object loss. That whenever an omnipotently uh, perceived object is lost, the lower cycle happens, and when the gain happens, the upper cycle happens. So if let us say we take the lower cycle, so somebody in whom the person is invested, let us say that person is with that person suffering from bipolar, and the bipolar person feels good, the person goes away, the shelf life of that memory continues for some time, and then the loss is slowly felt. And as the loss is felt, the lower cycle begins. If this is the situation, then how do we look at it? So we say
Hmm.
the root chakra comes to know from the senses, sensations given by the senses, that the object is no longer there. The absence is recognized. The absence is recognized, and the Agnya chakra then takes a cognizance of it, that how do we respond to this loss effectively. And the Agnya chakra comes to conclude that the loss is very severe, and therefore huge amount of sadness has to be generated. So the evaluation of that event leads to a command to generate huge amount of sadness. How would that happen? So first, the Agnya Chakra comes to know of the loss, and the loss has to be evaluated for affect to be generated. How much affect should be generated? So get into evaluation of loss. So there, what comes up is how strong was your desire? Number one. Number two, how safely are you rooted in the environment? Are there substitutes? Number three, characteristic elementals. Is the situation hopeful of the person coming back or a substitute happening, or if nothing is going to happen? Number four, the loss is evaluated, let us say, as huge and final. So the loss is acute and forever. Now the sensitivity comes in, that for a unit loss of such kind, how much effect should be generated. If the sensitivity is very low, again effect will be low. Sensitivity high, effect will be high. Sensitivity, if it is high and the decision of the Agnya Chakra also is high, the two highs combine and huge amount of sadness is generated by uh, depositing affinity on the heart chakra and huge amount of life energy on the heart chakra, which generates that sadness. And that sadness then percolates from the heart chakra to the Agnya chakra to the solar plexus to most of the chakras,
That
and
it
then
does.
the lower cycle happens and you feel the person just does not have any energy to do it. We say the depressive lower cycle is on. So this is how we would look in terms of the heat model, the lower cycle. Similarly, we can look at the upper cycle. The moment the object comes and the senses report it to the root chakra, the root chakra provides the recognition to the Agnya chakra, and then the Agnya chakra realizes the all good object is back, and therefore happiness has to be generated. So how much to generate? If it's an omnipotent object which is regained, huge amount has to be generated. How much sensitivity for a unit gain of omnipotent object? Sensitivity high, high affinity, high life energy, huge amount of happiness is generated. The regulating mechanism cannot control, and the upper cycle, the manic cycle, starts. So this is how we would look in terms of the heat model, the generation of the,
Pathology. Bipolar pathology.
yeah.
Phenomenal work and complex but educative. One more relishable discourse it was for me. Hope you all enjoyed. See you all again. Namaste.